you guys are ready.
Everybody can see me okay? I'm standing in the right position.
All right, everybody's good?
Good to go? All right, hi everybody. Yesterday I made some off-the-record remarks about essentialness, and so let me go on the record and talk about essentialness. I believe we're an essential organization. I believe that we need a culture of essentialness. That means we have to act like we are an essential organization. If you think about other essential organizations in society, in our communities, you think about hospitals, they're essential. Think about police departments, fire departments. If we were in the military in a time of war, essential. Those are essential organizations. They provide a public service, the absence of which would do great harm to the community. That's essential. We fit that definition. We provide a public service, the absence of which would do great harm to the community. We should be very slow then to close schools. I'm not saying we should never close schools. I'm saying we should be slow to do that. And when it is safe to traverse the roads with some care, like driving slowly, then we should be at school. And other situations like that. So one of the things I think as a system, an education system, we need to do is to really change our mindset around that. It's my belief that in this country, in our profession, we have closed too often. Third Future Schools didn't close after COVID, but almost everybody else did. We stayed away from schools too long. If we had a culture of essentialness, we would not have stayed away from school too long. We, the profession, we close schools. I mean, in Colorado, I've said this before, when there's an inch of snow on the ground in the winter, even though all the businesses are open. That's what I mean by a culture of essentialness. The other part of that is that if you believe, like I do, that teachers are the most important variable in the education of a child, then we need to make sure that we have days and room enough for teachers to be that most important variable. They are that important. We need to act like they're that important. We need to allow teachers to be at school so that they can help kids in their education. The flip side of that coin is that our parents need us to be at school so that they can be at work. Not always, of course, not in every situation, but in the situation, for example, yesterday. Most of Houston went to work. Most of Houston went to work. Most of our parents of our kids went to work. Which means that, and if you know, and I'm sure many of us do know about poverty. There were kids yesterday who did not eat a hot meal. There were kids yesterday left alone by themselves at home. There were kids yesterday babysitting siblings when they were young themselves, who needed a babysitter themselves. There were kids yesterday who spent all day alone in a house that didn't have power. That's what happened yesterday. No, not everybody, but enough kids that when we make a decision to close schools, we need to think about that. I need to think about that. We need to think about that. When we close schools, parents don't have a choice. They have to leave their kid at home or get other arrangements. And it's easy to say that, oh, it's easy to make other arrangements. No, it's not easy for some families. When we open schools, parents have a choice because they can always keep their kid at home. If they have other arrangements, they can make other arrangements and they can keep their kid at home. But there are many families that don't have a choice. They have to go to work. And we did not provide the best education possible for that kid, and we didn't provide a safe place for that kid, and we need to think about that. So what I said yesterday is going forward, I'm going to think twice about that, 3 times about that, and hopefully I'll make a better decision for the community, for the kids first. Now, some of you are also going to ask me some questions about the facilities today, so let me just segue to that and then I'll stop talking and you can ask me questions. So one of the things we're really proud of is that this district showed signs of a culture of essentialness today. 274 schools open today. Buses was driving kids today. After one of the coldest nights in this year, in the last year, was last night, we still had 274 schools open with kids in them, 185,000 kids, minus those who were at home, showed up, teachers showed up, and kids got educated. It happened to be an NWA MAP testing day, and they still took the test except for one school. Did not, because of challenges. Even with an infrastructure that we have not invested in over a decade, even with all the challenges of that, principals, maintenance workers, teachers, all did what they had to do to educate kids today. By the way, yesterday, Tuesday, we had principals in, we had maintenance workers in, we had executive directors in, we had a lot of people in, custodians, plant operators, who did what they needed to do so that we could open today. And they'll work overtime today to make sure we open tomorrow as we get out of this freeze. So it's like I said, a very old infrastructure. This district has kicked the can down the road for far too long. So of course there's going to be some issues. But that didn't prevent us as a district from doing our job and being essential. Is there going to be a school here or there that closed? Yes. Is there going to be a pipe burst here or there? Yes. That's predictable even without a freeze, with just cold weather. So overall, I'm very proud of the staffs. Did great work, showed that they were essential, and we got kids in education and helped our community.
Yeah, we're going to address some of your questions, but let's first start the Zoom because there are some media that will connect through the Zoom and they might have more questions. So, Joe, please. Joe is connecting. So, who will be the first question? Go ahead. Meanwhile, we connect to the Zoom.
Okay.
So, yeah, you can.
Go ahead. Oh.
Yeah, it will take like any time. We we'll connect him.
So in the meantime, go ahead.
Okay, Superintendent Miles, we just wanted to know, was there any sort of checks that were done on the water or heating systems in these schools? We knew that these freezing conditions were coming. We knew that some schools had older infrastructure. Were there any checks that were conducted to see how this might hold up during the freezing conditions?
Yes, last week, Friday, over the weekend, we talked to lots of different people about being in their buildings over the weekend. And then yesterday, Tuesday, we had all essential personnel, and that included all the principals, plant operators or senior custodians, maintenance workers, all doing checks on the buildings for water, for heat, also for the internet, but all of that yesterday and even before on the weekend. So, yeah, we knew what we were going to get into, and again, as a result of those checks, 274 schools were able to be operated today.
Was there any thought process when you found out that schools didn't have water or pipes were burst to maybe not let those kids come to school that day and maybe turn it virtual?
So throughout the morning, we had several meetings. I was on the phone with our senior executive directors of support, with the division soups, and I was getting updates all the time. And so, yes, we had minor problems here and there. I think we had to close 3 schools, but those only after the heat wouldn't heat up, or like a chiller went down last night. And so by the time they got there at 4 or 5 this morning, it wasn't enough to warm up the building appropriately. So in those situations, those were surprises, like a chiller going down in the night. But the rest of the schools were, I'm not saying that there weren't any challenges, but there weren't enough. The challenges wasn't so great that we had to close the school. Like I said, I think we closed 3 schools.
There have been a number of schools this morning that had heating and plumbing issues. So with that in mind, I mean, you talked about this culture of essentialness, but are you worried that those things might have distracted from, the kids' ability to focus on classes or on these exams? And then also with the exams, was there ever any, thoughts about postponing those? Yeah.
So first of all, we had every school take the exam. We did have some plumbing issues, but they weren't big enough to stop the instruction or stop exams. We're always going to have minor problems here and there, and so the maintenance people did a great job of addressing the leaks in the pipes and some of the flooding in some hallways, and they moved kids. We moved kids to the right, to rooms that were didn't have any water and things like that. And again, I don't want people to think there's 274 schools, so even if it was in 5 schools, it's not a lot of schools where there was plumbing issues. And when there were several leaks, but that could be handled without disruption to the class. Does some of these things affect or distract some kids? Of course, but not enough to where we would have to close or postpone.
Recording in progress.
So that's the answer to the question.
What's the minimum sustained temperature that you're comfortable keeping students in school with?
Yeah, that's hard to say, but let me tell you this, because it's not just a minimum temperature, it's how long it is, right? How long a person stays in it. And people have different thresholds. And then the question is the classroom this temperature? Is it that? Is that another classroom? Is it the whole building? Because today, some of the things you heard, like there's no heat in the building. Well, that I like I said, I got detailed reports all morning long from division soups and their senior executive directors, and in most cases, it was a few classrooms over here, a wing of a building over here, of a hallway over here, things like that. So, to answer your question, if on the whole it's below 60 degrees and it stays that way for 3 hours or so, that's probably too cold. And some people would say that's not cold enough because you can put a coat on. It's not, it's not terrible, but that's generally how we look at it. But again, it's hard to say, a hard and fast rule, because it could be 57 degrees in this classroom. A kid is in there for an hour, and then they go to the next classroom and it's 64 degrees. So do we send that kid home,
I even wonder if there's been posts
I'll come
circulating
back to you.
about using porta potties, not having access to water. How sanitary is that, and how do you guys address those issues when they come?
There were only a couple cases, if I know correctly, where they had porta potties, and part of that had nothing to do with the cold. For example, at Cook Elementary School, if I'm not mistaken, the city was already working on a water pipe or something, so we already had the porta potties there. It had nothing to do with today, and every school had access to water. Some schools did not have access to hot water. And so I don't think there was a safety issue. In fact, we asked that question several times this morning. Are any schools unsafe for kids? Are any schools not going to be able to provide lunch? There was a couple of schools where water was turned off because of a pipe. They brought water in for lunch.
We have a follow-up question from Dominic and then a question from Margaret.
So you mentioned earlier how it's very important to you that schools stay open so that parents have the choice, especially if they, have basic needs that aren't getting met.
Yeah, and especially on a day like yesterday or a day like today.
And that sometimes that will outweigh the advice of, emergency management personnel saying don't drive on the roads right now. Should teachers also have the choice to remain at home without facing discipline on those days if there is that advice to stay off the roads?
No, we'll make a decision based on the schools, but also in collaboration with other departments, just like it did this time. But we have a job to do that may not have all the same criteria as some other group. And if we make a decision as a district to stay open, teachers will be expected to be at work, drive slowly, leave early.
Superintendent, have you had a discussion today following your remarks about regretting keeping closing the schools? Have you had a discussion with the mayor about it, or do you anticipate discussing?
No, I think the mayor and I had a couple conversations prior to yesterday, or prior to today, I mean, or prior to yesterday, rather,
Right.
when we.
He wanted you to close the schools.
Yeah, I thought, I appreciate his advice. He has a hard job too, and he has a bigger area than I have, and he has to make a decision for his employees and the people that work for the city, and also have to, pay attention to all kinds of things that I don't have to pay attention to. He has that many different departments. So I think he made a decision for the city. I think he gave me good advice, the advice that he offered, I appreciate. At the same time, I have to, over time, build a culture of essentialness. And there's only one way to build a culture of essentialness. If you believe we're essential. Now, if you don't believe that, then that's a different argument. But I believe we're essential. I believe the teachers are essential. I believe we provide a public service, the absence of which would do great harm to this community. That's a definition for me of what essential service means. In any case, I have to build that culture, and the only way to build that culture is to act like it, make decisions based on it. And over time, I need to be consistent with that, because every time I'm not, it diminishes the culture of essentialness. So that is something I'm going to have to consider going forward.
But you did mention also that you thought fears were exaggerated by some people. Who was that directed toward?
Yeah, I don't need to mention specific people, but what I'm talking about is when I get comments that are not as accurate, those are the comments I need to kind of brush past and focus on what's good for our kids.
Did you think the mayor was exaggerating?
Oh no, yeah,
That's
not at all. I mean, I think I've been clear already, and I'll repeat it. I thought the mayor and I had good conversations. I liked the fact that he was willing to give me some advice. I liked the fact that he was coordinating, he was collaborating, and I think that's really says a lot about his trying to support the district as best he can, and I truly appreciate that. Nothing he said was out of place.
We have another question for Fox.
With the reasons that you just gave to keep the school district open, what made you decide to close the district?
So again, you know, there's lots of different factors, and I erred on the side of making sure that the roads could be traversed. If the roads could not be traversed, it might cause some safety issues for our teachers and our families. Again, we can argue about whether the decision was right or wrong. I'm saying that when I consider the culture of essentialness, that should have been a heavier weight than it was.
I just have one last question. Considering this is the first major cold of the season and we have the potential for other cold, anything you like to say to parents going forward, like don't bank on having another cold day, or do we see when we get there?
Yeah, I you know, every situation is a little bit different. I tried to say that yesterday, and I'm saying it today. You know, it's not a hard and fast rule. There's different weather conditions, and whether or not some people can safely traverse the roads is also a question, right? So I think we wait to see. I am saying that a culture of essentialness is something we need to act upon, and given the same conditions as they were, and that's saying a lot, right? Because I don't know if we'll ever repeat the exact same conditions. I would choose a culture of essentialness and keep the school open.
Go ahead.
Superintendent, going back to one part of what you said about there are students who need these services. The hot meal part, children staying home by themselves, them having to be babysitters for younger siblings. Could there ever be an option in the future to close schools but to keep some facilities open for families who may need to come in for a hot meal, or children who need a place to go from 7 to 2, etc.?
So the best way to do that is what I just said. If we keep it open, then that choice is there. If we close it, that choice is not there. So what we could do, and what we're going to socialize, is parents, if it's a day like that, we're going to name it something like a We Are Essential Day. You can keep your child at home, and that child can be excused. But if you need to get to work and you need your child at school, then please send them to school, because we'll be there.
Okay, because some parents were just concerned, hey, my child might miss instruction because there is class in session today.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think that's the right attitude for a parent, to always think, wow, I might miss instruction. I hope that's ubiquitous, but I suspect it's not. Still, I think this solution of keeping the schools open would satisfy those parents who are afraid that their child might miss instruction. At the same time, we know that if it's a day like yesterday, and some kids don't show up, we will have to provide reteaching or provide those lessons online, or do something so that kids can catch up, because for no fault of their own, they're at home.
That was a great question, because the first thing that came to my mind was the Sunrise Centers. So if it's a situation like yesterday where even if you are open, you're going to have a lot of kids in the school, that's disruptive because of all the relearning you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And the really important basic need that you're communicating is, a meal, a place to stay warm. it seems like there's some tension if the Sunrise Centers aren't the thing you go to, since that's being advertised as the thing that meets those needs.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Two things.
Yeah.
One, the Sunrise Centers are good. They're not an answer for a district this size for a weather situation, inclement weather situation. There's only 7 of them, and they're spread out all over. They can help in the locales that they're in. But the second thing, it's not only that we have to provide meals and a place for kids to go to. We also need to have as much instruction as possible. And so that's another reason for not closing too often. Every day is an important day for kids. We now will have 171 student-teacher contact days instead of 172 when it should be 180. We can't afford too many of those. We can't. Kids can't afford too many of those days where they're not getting high-quality instruction.
On that point, do you plan on making up yesterday's?
One more question. We have, the one in that. Go ahead.
Just a quick question, yeah. Do you plan on making up the day yesterday?
So we're actually in the middle of trying to figure out how many hours of instruction the kids will have, so that whether or not we meet TEA's requirement. If we meet the requirement set by Texas Education Agency, we will not make up the day. If we don't, of course, then we will.
Thank you all for being here.
Nobody online?
No, nobody. Use the raise your hand feature. So.
Okay.
Joe?
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, one-on-one.